Chapter 11. Marianne stabbed at the earth as though it had wronged her, plunging the short fork with a twist, tugging at green fragments that had dared to poke their tips above the soil, had seeded themselves where they were unwanted. Her garden was a place for new life, for peace, for connection with the earth. Now discord had wormed in just as surely as the shepherd's purse had contaminated her pristine beds. Often she welcomed weeds as a sign of nature's resilience, like the couch grass that grew wherever it wasn't wanted, spreading its tendrils beneath the soil, returning year after year and resisting all attempts to eliminate it, defying her. As she believed one day, nature would defy humanity's attempt to control it. When humans had done their level best to destroy the planet and the last sorry specimen had died out, plant life would prevail, and with plant life would come other new life forms. Humans might disappear, but the planet would survive. The garden clambered up the slope behind her house in steep terraces, strengthened by old railway sleepers with a greenhouse at the bottom. 5 years of loving, determined toil. At this season, colour triumphed, the gold of trumpet-like courgette flowers, brilliant red stars clambering up the runner bean frame, orange nasturtiums rioting on any surface that would give them purchase, the deep mauve of lavender, tall yellow sunflowers nodding over all, their centres brown as chocolate, luscious pink rhubarb stems beneath their giant fleshy leaves. Her paradise. But in every Garden of Eden, one day a snake would come, hissing and beguiling. Is it true that you once killed someone? The paper, so innocent, lying on the kitchen table. She had thought at first that Alice had left her a note until she'd seen the unfamiliar script. Half printed, half cursive. A man's writing. Men in her experience bothered less, scorned to round their letters or decorate them with calligraphic flicks. Is it true that you once killed someone? The words danced before her eyes. Lined paper torn from a pad, its edge uneven. Is it true that you once killed someone? For a moment the kitchen had dissolved. Rushing water had filled her ears and she'd clung to the table for support, her breath coming shallow and fast. She'd forced it deep and slow, watched herself from above when Roger and his gaggle arrived back from their lunch, smiled until her cheeks ached, cleared up after them with words she no longer recalled, counted the seconds until she could escape. Then the police Land Rover had barrelled into the yard. The detective's voice had been hard, and panic had clotted in Marianne's throat. She'd seen the suspicion in the DI's eyes, the disappointment, and wanted only to run. A step on the shingle below made her raise her head. It was an unwritten rule that residents of the bunkhouse did not disturb her in her home, never stated, but understood. Perhaps the quiet lad, Joe Ingalls, had not absorbed the message. He stood now on the path between her and the track, dark and silent, watching. Seeing him without his foil surprised her. Martin Davis was nowhere in sight. Perhaps he was out for a solitary walk on the hill. When he lingered, she abandoned the weeds and straightened. Further down behind the bunkhouse, the Woggles had started a game of cricket in the camping field, and shouts of joy and frustration pierced the air. That, for sure, would be where the more sociable Martin was to be found. "Not a cricket man, then?" she said. "Do I look like one?" Not in his black t-shirt and jeans, he didn't, but put him in flannels and a cricket sweater and he'd look the part. He crossed to the garden wall. Her skin prickled under his stare. As she'd moved around the dining room during that morning's breakfast, his brooding eyes had bored into her back like weevils. Now, however, she was not on duty and was under no obligation to be welcoming. She went back to her weeding. Earlier she had picked a basket of courgettes, planning to make both soup and a lemon cake with them. The boy plucked a courgette from the basket and turned it in his hands, admiring the gloss. He told her about his granddad, a keen gardener. "Or he was, anyway," he said. "His arthritis makes it hard now." It was the longest sentence she'd heard from him. A soft burr in his accent brought creeping memories of childhood. Sand dunes that went on for miles, sharp with spiked grasses, surfboards and surf wax, the call of seabirds, sun on hot tarmac and everywhere salt in the air. "North Devon," he said, when ignoring her better judgment she asked where he came from. "You ever been there?" Each vertebra prickled, kissed by lips of ice. "A long time ago?" He nodded as though he had already lost interest, but made no move, and continued to watch as she pulled a strand of hedge bindweed from a box divider. Another of nature's survivors, and so assured of its own beauty that it had no qualms about taking over an entire garden. Without asking for permission, he opened the gate at the bottom of the wall. Marianne stiffened. "I wanted to talk to you," he said, feet advancing on the narrow path. She bit back a sharp reply and instead asked coolly what he wanted to talk about, already sure that she didn't want to know. "This." He came closer and laid something small and flat on the soil beside her. An iPhone. Marianne sat back on her heels and looked at it. Fabric rustled as he straightened up, wafting the scent of soap, as well as something that must have been his own, not unpleasant. "And what's that? Apart from a phone, obviously." "It's hers." He crouched again and swiped a finger across the screen. Behind a large padlock icon smiled a girl, all fresh face and blue eyes, dark hair falling in soft waves about the head of a statuesque yellow Labrador, who didn't seem to object to how tightly it was being cuddled. A girl whom Marianne had seen before, though she might not have been able to say where or when, if Fraser hadn't just planted the knowledge. A girl she hadn't recognised in the windswept desolation of Titterston-Clee, or face down in the Devil's Pool. "Why the hell do you have her phone?" she said. "Found it." "Then why haven't you handed it to the police? You need to give it to them now." The boy didn't move, only watched her with those strange eyes. Cold grey in most lights, but with a hint of silver, like the sea when it reflected a dull sky. He seemed ill at ease. It occurred to her that perhaps she should be afraid. Everyone at the bunkhouse was some sort of suspect, so in theory he could be a killer. Unscientific as it sounded, he didn't, even in this proximity, feel like one. Awkward, prickly even, but not wishing her harm. "I found it here," he said, "the other night, by the path in that bracken. Almost trod on it." What had he been doing, walking past her house on the track to the Devil's Chair at night? Perhaps he meant evening, but even so the thought made her uncomfortable. He and Martin Davis had come down that way on the day that Anna Price had disappeared, but there would have been no need for them to use it again. The footpath from below the farm gave much better access. "I didn't want to get you into trouble," he said. "If the police knew I'd found the phone here, they might, I don't know, give you hassle. I thought I should talk to you first." His demeanour suggested a lack of ease within himself, like a teenage boy who hadn't yet got used to his own body. Unless he was trying to threaten her and she was misreading him. She'd never been a good judge of character. "You should give it to D.I. Fraser," Marianne said, "straight away. She's down at the bunkhouse with Roger, I think." He looked at her for a long moment and she said, "I don't know how it came to be outside my house, but you need to hand it in now." Stillness broke, and with a flick of his wrist he picked up the phone and unwound himself in a long, fluid movement, towering above her where she knelt. "Okay, I'll hand it in then, if you're sure." He turned, descending the steep path in an exaggerated saunter, his lean shoulder blades visible beneath his t-shirt like two right-angled triangles back to back. Everything about him was angular, unforgiving. Where his companion was all smiles, she didn't remember seeing his mouth curve upwards even once, except perhaps the flicker of one corner when the diggers had been sharing jokes over breakfast. They seemed an unlikely pair, him and Martin Davis. Or perhaps their qualities complemented each other. An image crept into her mind. The car park on Titterston-Clee, a broad-shouldered, lean figure gesticulating in anger over the girl in the blue coat. Could it have been him? Might he have known her? Was he the man Anna had been arguing with, or the owner of the car? The police had said the owner of the car was abroad, but perhaps they were mistaken. Maybe he and the man she'd been arguing with were one and the same. Joe Ingles. Only he was walking with a friend, and the witness to the argument had reported only one man. In his t-shirt and jeans, Joe Ingles was slight enough, but bulked out by waterproofs he'd be a size match for the man at the Clee. But then so would Martin Davis. With hats and jackets, they were almost indistinguishable. And if Joe Ingles had known Anna Price, then so too would Martin have done. Davis, however, hadn't just arrived in her garden with Anna's phone in his hand, and she only had the boy's word for where he'd found it.